The Shedeur Sanders effect. Even the NFL's toughest guys are talking. Alright, let's get into this, because something really significant just happened and it deserves your full attention. Jeffery Simmons, the Tennessee Titans defensive tackle, sat down on a podcast recently and basically handed us a golden confirmation of everything people have been saying about Shedeur Sanders. And look, this isn't some armchair analyst or a social media hot taker throwing opinions around. This is a guy who makes his living terrorizing offensive linemen and giving quarterbacks nightmares on Sunday afternoons. When Jeffery Simmons speaks about what it's like on that field, you listen. So who exactly is Jeffery Simmons? Let's be clear about something first. Simmons isn't just a good player. The man is a problem, a genuine certified headache for every center and guard in the league. When he lines up, quarterbacks already know they're in for a rough afternoon. He's earned every bit of his reputation through years of dominant, physically punishing football. So when he starts talking about a rookie quarterback in a way that's anything but dismissive, that's your cue to sit up straight and pay attention. The story he told, and why it's so revealing, here's where it gets really interesting. Simmons described a moment during his matchup against Cleveland where he hit Shedeur Sanders pretty hard, the kind of play that happens every single week across the NFL. Physical, aggressive, totally within the nature of the game. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Wrong. What happened next stopped him in his tracks. The Cleveland fans lost it, and not in the usual way, not that quick burst of anger that dies down by the next snap. No, these fans were on his case for the entire rest of the game. Every time Simmons walked past that sideline, every time he got close to the action, the crowd was letting him hear it. He even started firing back at the fans, doing gestures like, "Come on, keep going," basically poking the bear. Then, almost as if the football gods had a sense of humor, Shedeur Sanders went and scored. And as Simmons tells it, Sanders found him in the crowd and celebrated right in his face. His reaction, "I said bet." From that point on, it was full-blown trash talk mode. Non-stop, personal, relentless. And honestly, you can't even blame the guy. That's just great football theater. But here's the bigger point everyone's missing. What Simmons accidentally revealed in that podcast goes way deeper than a fun sideline story. Think about it from his perspective. This is a veteran NFL player, someone who has played in some of the loudest, most hostile stadiums in the country. He is professionally conditioned to block out crowd noise. It's basically part of the job description. Yet the Cleveland fans got under his skin so badly that he felt the need to bring it up on a national platform weeks later. That doesn't happen by accident. That tells you something real about what's going on in that city. The Cleveland faithful haven't just warmed up to Shedeur Sanders. They haven't cautiously adopted him the way fans typically do with a rookie, that slow, let's wait and see approach most young quarterbacks have to earn their way through. These fans are all in, fully committed, emotionally locked in, and anyone who dares lay a finger on their quarterback is going to hear about it, loudly, personally, and for a very long time. What this means going forward. Here's the part that should genuinely concern defensive coordinators around the league. When you travel to Cleveland and you're scheming against the Browns, you're not just preparing for their plays and personnel packages anymore. You're walking into a building where the crowd has collectively decided to treat every hit on their quarterback as a personal offense. That's a different animal entirely. Most stadiums have general fan enthusiasm, cheering for touchdowns, booing bad calls, the usual background noise of a football game. What Simmons described is something else. It's targeted. It's protective. It's 50,000 people who have emotionally adopted Shedeur Sanders as one of their own, and they will make sure you know it. Simmons tried to do what every elite defensive player tries to do. Establish dominance, send a message to the rookie, control the psychological battle. Instead, he discovered that the rookie comes with an army, and you can't silence an army. The double-edged sword for the Browns organization. Now, all of this is incredible news for Cleveland. And also, quietly, a little bit of pressure the front office probably didn't ask for. On the bright side, the Browns have accidentally built one of the most intimidating home field advantages in the NFL, centered entirely around one 23-year-old quarterback. Ticket sales, merchandise, TV eyeballs. When your fan base is this emotionally invested, the business side takes care of itself. That kind of connection between a player and a city is genuinely rare and takes most franchises decades to cultivate. But flip that coin over. If the organization ever finds itself in a position where they need to bench Sanders, move on from him, or make any decision the fans perceive as a betrayal, the blowback would be unlike anything Cleveland has dealt with in years. They're not just managing a football roster anymore.
They're managing the emotional expectations of an entire city that has decided this young man is theirs. Bottom line, Jeffery Simmons didn't sit down on that podcast intending to make a grand statement about the state of the Cleveland Browns. He was just telling a good story about a competitive game and a rookie who didn't back down. But in doing so, he accidentally gave us one of the clearest, most credible confirmations yet of something that's been obvious to anyone watching closely. The Shedeur Sanders phenomenon is real. It's powerful. And it's only getting started.
When one of the most feared defensive players in the NFL is compelled to talk about your fan base's energy weeks after the fact, not your stats, not your arm talent, but the feeling of playing in your stadium, that tells you everything you need to know. Cleveland has found their guy, and everyone in the league is starting to figure that out the hard way. Coach Prime is done playing nice, and he's coming for answers. Let's cut straight to it. Deion Sanders has had enough. The gloves are off, the patience has run dry, and Coach Prime is pointing fingers, not at random Twitter trolls, but at the people who actually had access, actually knew the truth, and chose to look the other way anyway. This isn't a rant, this is a reckoning, a father before a coach. People sometimes forget that underneath all the championships, the Hall of Fame rings, and the primetime persona, Deion Sanders is a dad first. And watching his son get picked apart in front of the entire football world, while people who knew better sat on their hands, that kind of thing doesn't just make you angry, it stays with you, it festers. For months now, Dion has been making noise about the way Shedeur was treated during the draft process, the character attacks, the whisper campaigns, the carefully crafted narratives that painted his son as arrogant, difficult, and questionable, not as an evaluation of his football ability, but as a full-on assault on who he is as a person. And when those stories started spreading, do you know what the people closest to the situation did? The ones who had actually been in the room with Shedeur, spoken to him, watched him shake hands and carry himself professionally? They said absolutely nothing. That silence is what's eating Dion alive. The reporter who should have spoken up. Here's where it gets uncomfortably real. Dion reportedly sat down face-to-face with a journalist who had been around Shedeur during the pre-draft process. Not someone watching from a distance, not someone piecing things together from secondhand sources. Someone who had seen firsthand what kind of young man Shedeur Sanders actually is. And when the mud started flying, when people were out there calling Shedeur rude, cocky, a locker room problem waiting to happen, this reporter said nothing, tweeted nothing, corrected nothing. So Dion asked the only question that mattered. Did you speak up? The answer was effectively no. And that's when Coach Prime made it clear. In his eyes, silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice. If you watched someone's reputation get torched, had the information to put the fire out, and decided it wasn't worth the trouble, you're part of the problem. Full stop. The double standard nobody wants to talk about. Now here's the conversation that makes people squirm a little. And that's exactly why it needs to be had. When a quarterback walks into a room with total confidence, carries himself like he belongs, talks with swagger and certainty about his own ability, the reaction depends a whole lot on who that quarterback is. For some guys, that confidence gets labeled as leadership. It gets celebrated. Analysts call it charisma, presence, the it factor. But when Shedeur Sanders walks in with that same energy, suddenly the language flips. Suddenly he's arrogant. Suddenly there are whispers about whether he's coachable, whether his personality will be a distraction, whether the spotlight his last name carries is really an asset or secretly a liability. Same behavior, completely different headline. Dion sees that contrast clearly, and he's tired of pretending it isn't there. I wouldn't want to coach in the NFL. That says everything. Pay close attention to that statement because it's one of the most telling things Deion Sanders has ever said publicly. This is a man who thrives on competition, a man who has chased the biggest stages his entire life, who built his brand on never backing down, never shying away from the spotlight. For that man to say he watched what happened to his son and wanted no part of that environment, that's not frustration talking. That's a deep, settled disgust. Whatever Shedeur went through during that draft process, whatever conversations happened behind closed doors, whatever teams were quietly talked out of considering him, left a mark on Dion that no amount of time is going to erase. He saw the machine up close, and he didn't like what he saw. But here's the thing about Shedeur. He didn't break through all of it. Every leaked story, every anonymous source, every analyst with a hot take and a platform, Shedeur Sanders kept his head down and kept working. He didn't fold. He didn't spiral. He showed up, prepared, and let his play do the talking. And that right there is probably the reason Dion is fighting so hard right now. Because his son came out the other side. He survived the noise. He proved the critics wrong. But surviving something doesn't mean it should have happened in the first place. You can cross a burning bridge and still be furious that someone set it on fire. Dion isn't angry because Shedeur failed. He's angry because Shedeur succeeded despite a system that tried to undermine him before he even had a chance to play. Now the tables turn. Here's the shift that Dion is engineering right now, and it's actually quite calculated when you think about it. He's not waiting for the season to start. He's not letting the narrative build momentum again before challenging it. He's getting ahead of it, naming names, asking hard questions, and making sure the people who had a platform and used it irresponsibly know that this time, there will be accountability. The message is simple. You don't get to shape the story and then pretend you were just doing your job. If you helped spread something you knew wasn't the full truth, or worse, something you knew was flat out wrong, Deion Sanders is going to make sure you own that, publicly, loudly, and repeatedly if necessary. Bottom line, this story is bigger than football. It's about power. Who gets to control the narrative around a young man's entire career before he's thrown a single pass in the NFL? It's about silence being used as a weapon. It's about a culture where character assassination can happen in slow motion, spread through polished commentary, incredible sounding voices, and then never really be answered for. Thank you guys, see you next video.